All right, welcome, folks. Welcome to another edition of Heavy Hands. I am your host, Connor Rebush. With me, as always, is Philma Kenzie. How you doing, Phil?
I am ready to fulfill my contractual obligations to watch this contractually obligated pay-per-view.
It's not great, is it?
Ain't the best.
Yeah. This is, the prevailing theory for the first half of 2023 was, they're robbing Peter to pay Paul here. They're absolutely slaughtering their fight night lineups, but at least the pay-per-views are stacked. And this is now at least the second example we've gotten this year where it's like, where are the good fights, actually?
Can they do those anymore?
Yeah, where are they actually? I don't know. I mean, did you see the, apparently, I haven't had these confirmed, so I may be talking on my ass, just something I read on the internet, but hey, what are podcasts for? The, Conor McGregor, Michael Chandler debut, the season premiere of The Ultimate Fighter got less than 300,000, viewers.
What does that mean nowadays?
It's not much.
I don't know what TV ratings mean. Is that bad?
I think it's pretty bad. I mean, it doesn't account, I don't believe, for ESPN Plus viewers, of which, given how pathetic we UFC fans are, there are probably way more than you would think. But it also, it's just because it's Conor McGregor. It feels like if anything could possibly bring people to watch TUF on TV, it would be Conor McGregor, and it doesn't appear to have gotten it. From what I've read, they're basically on par with the very first, the season premiere, in other words, the peak curiosity, episode of Power Slap.
Wow.
So,
okay, that's pretty bad.
Not good. We'll see. But, yep, they're still doing TUF. The content mill continues to churn out just a surprising amount of dog shit. We do have some good cards, not too far in the future, around the corner, so that's nice. There are points of interest on this card. This card, of course, which I don't think we even mentioned, it's UFC 289. Amanda Nunes versus Irene Aldana. It was supposed to be Amanda Nunes versus, Juliana Pena 3. We probably feel differently about that. I don't really super regret the loss of that. I mean, that fight is never going to be as stupid and amazing as the first one was. I mean, the first one was why the two fights were interesting at all. It wasn't interesting before the first fight, certainly. And I feel like every other woman Amanda Nunes has, defended her title against, the adjustment to beat Pena, as proven in the rematch, is pretty straightforward. And once that sort of, what's the one thing I can do that they can't deal with, is figured out, you know how Amanda Nunes' title fights look. Like, she has one good idea and the opponents have nothing, and then they're not physically on par with her, so there's nothing they can do to close the gap. So personally, I don't give a shit about Pena 3. I'd rather see her fight Aldana. At least a fresh contender.
I've told you this before, and I've disagreed. I wanted to see Pena 3 because I thought it would be funny, and I think that you are applying double standards, sir.
Double standards?
Yeah.
Go on, bitch.
You were all fine with having, like, multiple fights between Brandon Moreno and Davison Figueiredo.
Of course.
Why was that?
Well, because they were all good, except the second one.
And I will.
And then the third one was gangbusters, and I was like, why wouldn't I want to see that again?
Well, exactly. And you've seen two fights between Juliana Pena and Amanda Nunes.
Yeah.
And have both of them not been extremely entertaining?
I mean, yes, but I feel like it's sort of like I have the goofy asshole character and then the straight man. First fight, goofy asshole. Second fight, reaction of the straight man. It makes me laugh. The joke is finished. Like, I don't need fight 3 to explain the joke to me, if that makes sense. I get it. The story's done.
Well, I disagree. I think it could have been driven into the ground some more. Late season Simpsons of just like terrible title fights.
Yeah.
But instead, here we are.
This isn't an amazing title fight. Much of Amanda Nunes' title reign has not been super compelling. It's true. I mean, I wouldn't. It's not like I'm craving this over the Pena 3 fight. It's just like I don't feel super upset about losing Nunes Pena 3 because I feel like I get it.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway. That's what we're talking about. Fortunately, we do have a Gangbusters co-main event to support this. Charles Oliveira versus Beneil Dariush. Very good fight, very interesting. Should be, I mean, knowing Beneil Dariush, this is almost certainly one of those grappler versus grappler fights where we will see at least a little bit of Dariush actually testing Oliveira's grappling. That is always an interesting factor to consider. Last week we had Kai Kara-France versus Amir Albazi. I thought a very good, like we predicted a simmer. I would say it was a nice rolling simmer that threatened to boil over at a few points as the fight wore on. I found it very entertaining and competitive throughout. Alex Caceres, Daniel Pineda also happened. We're going to talk about, I think, Nunes Aldana, Oliveira Dariush, and then finish off by recapping Albazi Kara-France. And then, check out the Patreon because the plan is to have a bonus episode up discussing some of the other stuff from these undercards. Anyway, well, that's about 6.5 minutes of us not quite getting into the fight. Is that a sign of anything, Phil? Let's talk about it. Amanda Nunes, the greatest female fighter of all time.
Yeah, probably.
Maybe.
I think it's probably still. To be honest, I think it is actually Valentina Shevchenko at this point.
I think Shevchenko has a stronger case. I agree.
In terms of the general quality of her competition, she has beaten very good, notable fighters from 2 weight classes. She came extremely close to beating Amanda Nunes herself, despite being
from
much smaller than
3
her.
weight classes. I mean, she beat Yin Jacek as well.
Yeah. So yeah, it's probably Shevchenko.
It probably is. Yeah. Competition, most of the time, not really stronger than Nunes's. But, there's been a lot of it and the highlights in there. I mean, I don't know. I found Shevchenko's early UFC performance against Holly Holm. Frankly, it's one of the better Shevchenko fights to watch, and it's a pretty comprehensive ass whooping. So, she has.
Yeah, yeah. That's a like top 5-ish all-time bantamweight.
Yep.
Pretty shut out pretty comprehensively. She also utterly thrashed like, what's her face? Jessica Andrade.
Yeah.
You know, in her prime. Who was also like one. It wasn't even like you could look at Jessica Andrade's career and be like, she's a natural strawweight who can't make it work at flyweight because she obviously did.
Yep.
So yeah.
Yeah, and a few of Shevchenko's wins have aged pretty well too. I don't know if that's necessarily the case. I don't know. Maybe Pennington has aged well. Pennington has only gotten better, in fact, since losing to Nunes, shocking me and many other people. I don't know. Mm-hmm. We're not just here to debate goatness. It's just that the thing is it forces you to sort of consider, the strength of Amanda Nunes' resume. It forces me to ask about like the true depth of her game and especially sort of what level of, because obviously the hardest thing to do in combat sports is to hold a title against several waves of challengers, right? Like that is much, as we know, much harder, or at the very least, a very different task to winning a title is holding back a bunch of, by definition, extremely motivated opponents who spend your entire reign sort of at least having the chance to like gather intel on you and see what the previous challenger does, etc. Very impressive that Nunes has done that, but then you have to ask, like, what degree of the preparation that is usually required of fighters who manage that feat has Nunes demonstrated against these waves of challengers? And I would argue that by and large, broadly as it pertains to her career-long style, which has not really gone away, as we were reminded in the Pena fight, but also from opponent to opponent, the adjustments have been pretty blunt, shall we say.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty straightforward. Like, here's one good idea. Full credit to Amanda Nunes for sticking to those ideas. But generally, I think the change in Nunes' game that we appeared to see and is really that she just does less. When she wins these title fights, and that's why they're not really very fun to watch most of the time, she just does less. And yeah, it's good to have that first Pena fight to be reminded of why it is that it makes sense for her to do less, because when she loses control, as she used to very early in her career, she flames out and falls apart pretty quickly. So yeah, Amanda Nunes, do less. That's the motto.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, you can make the argument that, like, guys like GSP was someone who just went out there and mostly wrestled strikers and struck with wrestlers or grapplers, and occasionally had some pretty ugly adaptations, like his famous shields overhand. But yeah, I think just in terms of the general level of technique and athleticism he was up against, it's not really much of a question. But yeah, I mean, so the basic question here is, how does Irene Aldana fit into the broad scope of adaptations that Amanda Nunes can make? Because we know who Amanda Nunes is. She's a big, powerful athlete who can punch straight with power, who can kick pretty hard as well, who probably isn't any great shakes defensively, but is just going to be able to crush people in most situations with pure power, but is also like a very dangerous wrestler and top position grappler.
Mm-hmm.
It is possible to break her by forcing a pace. Most people cannot force a pace on her because either they're a bad wrestler like Jermaine Durandamy and they get put on their back, or just forced into endless clinch situations, or because they simply cannot compete with her standing.
Right.
Attempting to force that kind of pace on the feet just gets them battered.
And largely, I think the reason they can't compete with her standing is usually the physical disparity. In most of these cases, like Raquel Pennington is just glacially slow compared to Amanda Nunes. She's also just smaller than her. She's just that was the damning thing. If Raquel Pennington was the same size as Amanda Nunes, she probably would have had a much better chance of enforcing her game. But she was just stranded out of range where she was getting lit up by jabs, and no one had told her to slip jab. Yeah, Felicia Spencer couldn't even sniff what might have been an interesting grappling dynamic because she's a bad striker. And so let's sort of sum up the adjustments that Nunes has shown, or at least the one note preparations that she has made for these opponents, right? And there's quite a lot of them. Again, this is not just to critique Amanda Nunes. She has held the fort against an awful lot of challengers. But we are forced to look at how she has beaten them. Ronda Rousey, Chris Cyborg, Gambit. Basically. Nunes classic. Maybe it works, maybe it doesn't. That's the approach she took to them. Raquel Pennington, slow. So just sort of have a very easy task of playing Matador when you are big and fast, like Amanda Nunes is. Valentina Shevchenko, that's one where the physical disparity, and certainly in size, but Shevchenko is a great athlete. That was, I think, purely a stylistic understanding. Shevchenko will not commit to anything. So just literally do less. Stay far away, don't commit, just poker. That's how Nunes won that fight. incredibly uninspiring performance from both women. But kudos to Amanda Nunes for grasping the stylistic dynamic there. Jermaine Durandamy, like easily on par, if not better than Nunes on the feet. I mean, I think better is, in fact, you can look at the fight and see.
For sure.
Durandamy is a genuinely good striker. She is also a good athlete. Literally does not know how to wrestle. So the adjustment there, pretty simple. And you can even see, like, it even looked a little desperate at times in that fight, that Nunes was, like, gassing and was feeling the pressure and was eating shots, but she had such an easy out. Every time she thought about a takedown, Durandamy just fell over. Felicia Spencer, slow and awkward on the feet, couldn't actually get to her wrestling, much like fighting Raquel Pennington. Yeah. And then I guess you have Holly Holm. I mean, I don't know. Maybe stands up as one of Nunes' better wins. She just kind of engaged her at range and found a harder shot.
Yep.
And then you have the Pena fight where I think very clearly just didn't take it seriously. It seemed to me that Nunes was kind of over it at the time, having defended so easily for so long. And yeah, thought she was going to thrash Pena, and that allowed Pena to bring out the Amanda Nunes that has always been in there, the insecure brawler who, yeah, you know what? I actually found an interesting quote. It's on her Wikipedia, but it also comes from an MMA fighting, I think, interview. I think this explains so much about Amanda Nunes' like fundamental feelings about fighting and explains her style. Her mother used to box, she says. I followed her footsteps into training. She loves fighting. My uncle used to fight Vale Tudo, and my mother even cornered him in some of his fights. She always says, the first strike has to be yours. She can't touch you before you touch her. You have to intimidate her. And I think that's Amanda Nunes' mindset. That's why she remembers that advice. Like, that is why she wore her brawling nature on her sleeve. Earlier in her career, it was like, this isn't a brawling out of confidence or a love of chaos. This is brawling like, I can't let you get me first. I have to stop you before you stop me. And having learned how that could backfire, what she has done as a champion is basically learned to hide that and find a different, safer, less committal way of preventing the opponent from touching her first, basically. You know what it's a lot like? It's a lot like late career Alistair Overeem.
Yeah.
You remember that period, the medium ream era? Where it's like, yeah, he's like still chinny. You will still see flashes of classic Overeem where he tries to get after somebody and then blows up as a result. But in a very broad sense, he's like, I'm going to bully you by being an annoying pest who won't engage, rather than this overwhelming need to bully you with like raw aggression and physicality. That is the Amanda Nunes turn. And so, yeah, back to your question then. Where does Aldana fit into that sort of range of straightforward adjustments?
Oh, you want me to answer? Oh, Jermaine Durandamy.
Right. That's the closest, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, go on.
Her last fight, the problem is that Jermaine Durandamy had the advantage of being, debatably the best striker in the division.
Yeah.
But she had, she could lay claim to being someone who was genuinely dangerous in one of the areas that Nunes wanted to fight her in. Aldana has lost fight to Holly Holm and Raquel Pennington.
Yep.
And to that point, Caitlin Chukagian. This is not an overwhelming striker, but also isn't the greatest grappler either. You know, she's never submitted Juliana Pena like Jermaine Durandamy did.
I think she's probably a better grappler than Jermaine Durandamy. That surprising result aside. Like her actual jiu-jitsu is pretty solid. She's generally pretty difficult to completely overwhelm on the ground, though that too has happened.
Yeah, so that is my again a significant issue with this fight is that a lot of her ground game does seem to be very offense focused.
Yes.
And not so much on doing things like stopping the takedown.
Yeah.
I mean, so she's coming off that win over Macy Jason, a fight which she was well on her way to losing, I'm going to be honest.
Certainly. The second round in particular was not going well.
No, and it wasn't, and the second round did not come from a particularly untelegraphed takedown. I mean, it was just that Macy Jason just ran her into the fence, then picked her up and took her off it.
Yep.
And similarly, in the third round, once again, she went down. I can't remember what it was. It was a pretty straightforward, was it just like a single leg? But it didn't look like good takedown defense.
No, she definitely doesn't. I would say better grappler than Germaine Durand to me, relatively.
I would even debate, I would honestly debate it.
Yeah, I would say debatably better grappler. Wrestling, there's no question she is at least as bad as Germaine. There are even times where I think I've seen stronger wrestling defense from Germaine than I have from Aldana.
I mean, Germaine has gotten into fights with people like Raquel Pennington, and for that matter, Holly Holm, who will do their best to engage in like grinding clinch wars.
Yep.
And has quite adeptly gotten her way out of it.
Yeah, I mean, I think largely the difference there is, as between Nunes and the rest of the division, I think it's largely physical. Durandamy is a very good athlete. I mean, she is fast. She just reads athlete when you look at her move. She's got a natural coordination and balance and sense of distance on the feet. She's fast. She's big. She's very big, and she's strong. And so that makes up for the fact that she, really, when it comes down to it, doesn't know how to wrestle either. She will still get out of some of these situations that Aldana is too overall slow to escape. What I will say though is that I think Aldana, is becoming more like Germaine Durandamy on the feet in these last couple years. She is tapping into her ability to be a more overwhelming striker. She has shown a new willingness to pressure. She has shown to be a lot more eager to put her combinations out there. And to actually get them to work by seizing the initiative and pressing people back and then uncorking 4 or 5 punches in a row. She is very well schooled in terms of combination punching. Her problem has always been that she's quite foot slow. She usually needs to be planted to throw these combinations, and so people are able to outmaneuver her. And she has been historically a slower starter. It has taken her a while to sort of ramp into a more fight-winning pace. And I think she's started to resolve that issue. She has started to appreciate the value of aggression and has become a little less risk-averse, basically. I think that's good for her. I think she's always been quite risk-averse throughout her career. But I think she's still not necessarily Germaine Durandamy. And at the end of the day, the adjustment is pretty much the same, right? Like, Amanda just doesn't have to strike with her any more than she wants to. That's how it seems. They don't even have to be great takedowns, which is good, because Nunes is not a phenomenal wrestler. She's just a willing wrestler and a good athlete. But she's going to get Aldana down, and that is almost certainly what's going to decide this fight.
Yeah. So I think the advantages that Aldana has are that basically she's the same size as Nunes. She's not one of the people who's going to be dramatically outsized. But I think she might be very slightly taller.
Yeah,
but I think they've got the same reach. So yeah, she won't be. I don't think she'll be physically overwhelmed. She has a nice left hook, as we've sort of seen. Nunes has never been super invulnerable to left hands.
No,
and is quite a sort of stick the jab out fighter. I can totally see Nunes countering her with the left hook at some point. But yeah, other than that, I mean, I just have to be like, aside from the fact that Nunes is going to be older and, you know, her motivation can be questioned now just because she's been, you know, she's been doing this for so long. The Pena one was like a fight where she had to get it back. And, you know, once she's done that, does she really find herself as thrilled as she once was?
She clearly regained.
Aside from that, like, what reason is there to pick, to expect Irene Aldana to do better than Jermaine Durandamy, apart from just, age and wear?
That's it.
Because I just don't think there is any.
No, I mean, there is the dim possibility that, again, Aldana, if she's smart, she will come into this fight having prepared herself to make it a bit of a war and to try to pressure Amanda, to try to walk her into the fence and just start firing combinations and accept that she's going to get tagged, but she's got to make her work on the feet and maybe distract Amanda from even the possibility of grappling. But it's a dim prospect to actually get a win that way. That's what Durandamy tried. She put a lot of pressure on Nunes. She hit her with a lot of shots. She landed nice left hooks and counter right hands. And, I mean, Jermaine had one technical beyond the physical disparity where she's just a superior athlete. She also had a massive technical leg up on Aldana in that Jermaine Durandamy is the only woman in this division who can check a fucking low kick.
Yes.
She actually,
that is very true.
She completely took Amanda Nunes' low kicks out of the equation. And that is one of her favorite weapons when she is faster and more mobile than her opponent, is to just chip away at them with those low kicks. Jermaine didn't have to deal with those. Irena is a plant her feet boxer, who tends to plod around when she has to reset. She is absolutely going to get the shit kicked out of her legs, in addition to having to focus on pressuring and catching up with the faster fighter without running into a shot, and even more so without getting taken down. So, it's Nunes. It's Nunes. All right.
Yep.
Well, you know, an interesting fight in that it gives us a chance to sort of reflect on this division and Amanda Nunes as a fighter. I do find that angle compelling. More compelling, unfortunately, I think, than the matchup itself. But that's the Amanda Nunes story, isn't it? You see all these matchups and you're like, okay, I get it. And then it plays out like you thought it would. That's it. That's the drama you hope for a pay-per-view main event. Fortunately, as I said at the top, we have another fight on this card. That is Charles Oliveira versus Beneil Dariush. That is a very exciting matchup. After that, we are going to recall last week's main event between Kai Kara-France and Amir Albazi. And then we're going to save all the undercard stuff. That includes like Dan Ige, Nate Landwehr, Nasruddin Imavov, Chris Curtis. From last week, we had a ridiculously stupid barn burner between Alex Caceres and Daniel Pineda. We're going to talk about all of those on a bonus episode on the Patreon. So, Chucky Olives, Beneil Dariush, after this.
Hey everybody, thanks for listening to this week's Heavy Hands. If you like what you hear, please consider pledging to support the podcast on Patreon. Patreon is basically continuous crowdfunding. You sign up to contribute a certain amount per month to help us with production costs and the like, and in return you get rewards ranging from a mention on the Heavy Hands website to a question or topic of your choice being discussed on the show. We have a lot more in the works to reward you for your help, and we appreciate every contribution. No amount is too small. Just head over to patreon.com and find how you can help out the only show dedicated to the finer points of face punching. Now let's get back to it.
Welcome back, folks, to Heavy Hands. We are talking about the co-main event now of UFC 289. Chucky Olives, Benny Dariush, Benny No Ass, Benny Longback. That's what it is, as Shiram would have it. What do you say, Phil? I mean, this is a good fight.
This is a tremendous fight.
Yeah.
This is what we so rarely get. a great fight in one of the divisions where people just sit on their rankings.
Mm-hmm.
And true to form, it's a brave Brazilian on one side and someone like Beneil Dariush on the other.
Yeah.
These are the ones that we have to get. You have to get ones where both of the guys are like willing to risk it, and thus you don't really want to see either one of them lose.
Yep. One guy who has a mentality that will make him an insufferable shithead forever. You will never be able to tell someone like Beneil Dariush that hard work doesn't pay off for everyone all the time, because it has paid off for him. He is a grinder mentality. He has just stuck at it. He fights absolutely everyone. And by the sort of caprices of the gods, it has put him now on the end of I think 7-fight win streak in the lightweight division. 8 fight win streak in the lightweight division. Not all of those, like headlining wins, but there are plenty of strong ones in there as well. And it's lightweight. I mean, the parity in this division, as we know, is pretty strong across the board. And so you have to take a win streak like Dariush's extremely seriously. But yeah, it figures that these are the two guys, right? Of course, these are the two guys giving us the kind of fight we're getting fewer and fewer of. So, Charles Oliveira made it to the top of the mountain himself, a sort of improbable story. You wouldn't expect a guy like Charles Oliveira to be the champion, but if he was, you wouldn't expect him to defend for long. That's what happened. He lost his title on the scale, took the fight nonetheless against a dominating positional grappling southpaw who pressured him and knocked him down on the feet. Tell me why he's not going to lose to Beneil Dariush.
Yeah, this is one of the ones that I am struggling with as well. Because, I mean, the main thing is that I think just Dariush is just a very volatile opponent.
Yeah.
I mean, he's been fighting... This man has been escaping the athlete allegations for his entire career. And I have, we've talked about this before. I don't know how he's gotten away with it quite so much. I mean, just because he looks like an incredibly unimposing, assless 42-year-old.
He's got an ass made for a pair of khakis. He looks like a teacher.
Yeah. But also, he's
ever.
also someone who's now like 10 years into his career, but is still just like windmilling people to death. Just knocking them dead.
Yeah.
Hauled poor, what's his face?
Drakkar Klose, Carlos Diego
Rashid Magomedov. Around. Yeah. Just like absolutely horsed him around the cage in the clinch.
Yeah.
Was an absolute brick wall against Mateus Gamrot. He is someone who has managed to slide under the radar as like a unphysically imposing analyst's darling.
I mean, I wouldn't say. I suppose this shows the weakness of our casual use of the term athlete, which of course has come up before. People are like, "Well, what do you mean this guy's not an athlete?" Like, he never gets tired. He's strong as shit. He hits hard. How is he not a good athlete? And, you and I have an ill-defined but nonetheless clear picture in mind when we use that term, right? We're picturing fucking Yoel Romero. That's an athlete, right? Fast, explosive, like impossible scrambling ability, just able to feel his way through seemingly any fighting situation, and make it up as he goes. That's what I think of when I say athlete. Beneil Dariush is not that. But you're right, it would be completely wrong to say that he is not physically imposing. I believe he's strong, certainly. He certainly hits like a truck. Like, he is the definition of heavy-handed. He does not have the bang power of a shotgun. He has the booming power of a fucking sledgehammer to the chest. And And I would say for physical comparisons, Beneil Dariush is most reminiscent of a guy like Dan Henderson.
Yep, fair enough.
That kind of physicality. You try to grapple with him, it looks like he's made of wood or stone. He will just lob a not particularly fast strike at you, and it will devastate you. But he's not like super quick or agile on the feet, is he? And can absolutely get caught out of position by a wide variety of different opponents. I mean, like, I would pick Beneil Dariush to beat Alexander Hernandez any day of the week. Any day. Especially, I mean, he literally does the thing that Hernandez struggles with against everyone, which is like getting in your face, making you throw, and then following you back out of the pocket with just a vicious salvo of power shots. But he, instead of beating him when they fought, he just got instantly KO'd. You see him against a guy like
one of the things that he doesn't actually have is he doesn't have a great chin.
No.
I mean, because I'd also pick him to beat like Ramsey Nidjem at any stage in his career.
Absolutely, yes.
But he didn't.
Yeah. And then you see him against an athlete like Edson Barboza, and the physical difference is once again pretty clear.
Yeah.
Even
though he was winning that fight.
He was muscling Barboza around. He's a big, strong dude, so. And a very good grappler, obviously. That is a huge saving grace. In a different way than Charles Oliveira's grappling is a saving grace. More often than not, the saving aspect of Oliveira's grappling game is that it persuades people not to grapple with him, as we have sort of divined, over the course of his brief championship career, and why we went into the Makhachev fight being like, oh yeah, like he's just not going to believe the bluff of Oliveira's guard, and so he's going to beat him. And, that's again, pretty much how I see this fight, with the caveat that Oliveira may very well just knock Dariush's block off.
Yeah, because that's one of the other things which defines Beneil Dariush's career, is that you can look at his opponents and just say, do they have a particular level of explosive offense that they bring to the table?
Yeah.
And people that get above that level have tended to be.
Yep.
Just because they catch him once. And also, his chin is obviously not good enough even to insulate him from people who are not particularly big hitters. I mean, he was in serious trouble against Drakkar Klose. Yeah,
Drakkar Klose obviously a good athlete in our usual mold, but not exactly known for knocking people out. And that was one of those instances where Dariush was just chasing him. The red mist had descended and just got like horribly out of position. He doesn't have that kind of fluid coordination you expect out of the best athletes in the world. He was just sort of fumbling, losing his feet, trying to put too many strikes together, thinking he had Klose out of position, and just walked into a huge counter that was way faster than he could anticipate. The other thing about Dariush, though, and why he has pulled through in so many of these fights where he gets himself into trouble, he is an extremely crafty and focused fighter. And you could see it in his eyes in like that close fight. After he got tagged, he solidified himself, if that makes sense.
Yep.
Klose hit him. He had to retreat. He set his feet. And then he's just like in position, like, okay, I know what's happening. A little Robbie Lawler-esque. I know what's happening. You're going to come after me. Not thinking, oh God, I have to survive. Rather thinking, now's my chance. And that is exactly how that fight played out. Klose thought he was going to finish him. Instead ran into a series of devastating counters, and then another reckless onslaught that this time he was not able to withstand knocked him out. So, I mean, Charles Oliveira dangerous on the feet, big, probably going to get to pressure. Dariush, that's the only time Charles Oliveira is really any good as a striker is when he gets to pressure. That has never changed. Fast with his hands, going to use his reach, going to put together some nice combos. Pretty decent at countering these days too. Even if his defense is not all that much better than it used to be, his comfort in the pocket is miles beyond what it was in the early days of his career. there's every chance he might just wreck Dariush in the first few minutes, or even after a competitive
Literally the first few seconds, yes.
Yeah, or after a competitive first round, like the first moments basically of any round until we start to hit a kind of downward spiral point where Dariush, I assume, will take over about midway through the fight. The first half is going to be super dangerous for Beneil. On the other hand, you know, you have fights like Beneil's against like James Vick. It's like, he's a big tall guy. Like Charles, the problem for Charles, he tried to do this shit against Islam. You know, he got to pressure a bit. And, the southpaw was just like, okay, throw, and just nailed him on the chin because he wasn't intimidated. And so there's every possibility that Dariush could KO Oliveira early as well. Or at the very least, knock him down and then follow him to the ground and start winning. So, I don't know. Any feelings on, which way that possibility will go?
Yeah, I mean, on the, like just looking back through their careers, and I guess you kind of have to be like, where has Dariush shown that he can synthesize the approaches that he needs for Oliveira? I kind of feel like the answer is pretty much yes.
Mm-hmm.
So, a big, tall person that you need to push backwards and who is going to be there to get dinged with overhands. This is the James Vick fight.
Yep.
Admittedly, I'm not gonna enrage any of the Chucky Olive fans by claiming that James Vick is anything like as potent as Oliveira is, but
he's even more fragile too.
Yeah. But Oliveira isn't defensively any better than James Vick, not really.
No. The difference is really just that Oliveira gets knocked down when James Vick would get knocked out cold.
Yeah, because his main thing is that he's like very good at watching the shots now and bracing for them. He has very good eyes.
Yeah.
And again, this is genuinely a big threat for someone like Dariush, who increasingly in recent years is a complete madman on the feet.
Yes.
Like, simply there's a huge chance that he winds up for some giant swing and Oliveira just draws the shortest distance between 2 points and just punches him in the face before it's halfway done.
Counter uppercut, counter knee. I mean, just pull counter and come back with a 1-2-3 kind of combination. All of these possibilities will be there almost any time Dariush engages. I mean, Dariush is capable of a much more measured striking approach. We saw more of that against Gamrot, but that was Gamrot. Like, Chucky Olive is going to bring it out of him. Whether you see that aspect of Dariush or not is really up to his opponents. And if they test him, if they get in his face and they make him fight, then the red mist descends and he turns into a berserker.
Yep.
So yeah. Counters.
And yeah, the second question you ask is, you got to ask about this question about this fight is, can Dariush be dissuaded by his opponent's, by the level of threat that his opponent offers on the ground? And again, like, it can be, generally the answer is no. He's willing to,
I don't think anyone
he's willing
dissuades
to
him
fight
at that point.
people like wherever. I think the two main examples here are Carlos Diego Ferreira and Jim Miller. I think Jim Miller is actually possibly the more relevant one here.
Yeah.
You know,
and there's Michael Chiesa as well, where Dariush actually did get caught, but was, despite that, I mean, by rear naked choke against an absolute back take specialist who was bigger than him. But he was perfectly willing to grapple with Chiesa and was definitely winning that fight until the sudden turnaround.
Yep. I mean, I think Jim Miller is probably the best example, because there are, again, with all these questions, the risk is greater than it was when Dariush fought whoever it was, basically. The risk is far greater for Dariush against Charles Oliveira than it was against James Vick, for him to just pressure him and trying to chase him down and punch him in the head. The risk is far greater for him to essentially wrestle and, more to the point, clinch up with Charles Oliveira than it was with, like, Jim Miller.
Yeah.
Because a big part of that was Dariush, like, crushing Miller into the fence, landing knees, and elbows, and then kind of transitioning to the takedown. This is going to be much harder
That's against
Charles Oliveira.
Yeah, that's a very good point.
Charles Oliveira is very dangerous in the clinch. Yeah, I mean, I think I still, outside of the kind of volatility of the matchup, do kind of feel like Dariush can just put it together. There's just the fact that he's both gotten knocked the fuck out in the past, and he's gotten tired late in fights.
Mm-hmm.
I find myself less likely to worry about that in this particular one, simply because of that Gamrot fight.
Mm-hmm.
And because I suspect that if he can get his wrestling going, and if he survives until around 3, he will mostly be in top position, and that doesn't seem to tire him out very much.
Yeah, very much so.
But yeah, I mean, I think I just kind of favor Beneil Dariush.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, I don't think, I think particularly if granted a lot of time to work in top position, Beneil is so comfortable there. The first round, for example, of his fight with Diego Ferreira was insane. Not only lots of scrambling and grappling and fighting for takedowns, but also just completely classic Beneil style reckless punching exchanges. Both guys hurting each other at different points in the round. And then it was Ferreira who started to slow down a little bit first, allowing Beneil to bank more time on top of him. And Beneil looked fine down the stretch in a fight like that. Looked fine, just shutting down a million takedowns from Mateusz Gamrot. I think, yeah, allowed to sort of be in control in the driver's seat. Whether that happens because of he's on top or because he's pressuring, or as it was the case against Gamrot, both. That makes it a lot less likely that Beneil will gas. The interesting thing here is that Charles is probably going to be the one who insists on pressuring. Beneil is a good pressure fighter, but he's not the kind of fighter who, like, will insist on coming forward the entire fight. He's perfectly happy to concede some ground and walk the other guy into counters if they really, really want to come after him. And Chucky is going to really, really want to come after him if he's smart, because you do not want, from Charles Oliveira, I don't want to get pressured by Beneil Dariush, any more than I want to be stuck underneath him. So, yeah, I think that's kind of the story here. And I think you just have to favor Dariush with the danger points aside, that, like, he is going to create some grappling engagements. They may stem from him knocking Oliveira down, but that happens all the goddamn time. Even against Islam Makhachev, Oliveira got knocked down more than once. And yeah, that is basically, the safety valve that just doesn't exist in this kind of matchup for Charles. That, like, oh, here's somebody who doesn't give a shit about you playing guard. And Dariush is super defensively responsible in guard. He is an amazing scrambler, not because he's lightning quick, but because he is so positionally aware and strong. One thing that I really remember that is just standing out in my mind from the footage I've watched here was a sequence against Diego Ferreira where Diego dropped for a leg lock. He did this a couple times, and he was trying to use this leg entanglement. Essentially, he forced Beneil to go, like, knee down to barrel roll out of the attack on his leg. And Diego was looking to take the back off of this. Kind of keeping that leg laced up just long enough to reach up and grab a kind of seatbelt. And Dariush turned out of the leg lock. He's gonna get his back taken if he tries to just run straight out of this entanglement. That's how that works. Dariush senses that Diego is coming onto his back, and he actually, without turning around, he backs up into him. not looking at him. He just feels that his back is exposed. He feels the guy's trying to climb up his back, and just crushes him. It's just this positional understanding of like where to put his weight, where to put his hips to stay completely on top of a moving opponent. He just crushes him with his ass and flattens him out, and then once he has him off the back...
Oh, the irony of it all.
Yeah, yeah. And then once he has him flattened back out, he basically stacks him backwards. Doesn't stack him, but yeah, he flattens him out backwards, and then he spins into his guard, and he's in top position. That just demonstrates such a keen awareness of... Like, let me put it this way. Our friend Ben Cohn must love watching Beneil Dariush fight.
Mm-hmm.
Because all the simple shit that Ben was talking about last time he was on here that like only works in MMA, like, ooh, jiggle around to shake the guy off your back. Yeah, Diego also tried that against Beneil. Guess what? That's not how he got him off his back when he was on there. Beneil's positional understanding is too solid. His weight is too well positioned. He is super heavy when he needs to be, and he floats like a feather when he needs to stay on top all the time. Very difficult to reverse, and if you can't reverse him, if you can't submit him, you need to use those attacks to try to reverse position. These just seem like nigh impossible tasks if you're going to start from the position of Beneil Dariush is on top of you. So, yeah, however the grappling engagements arise, I would give Dariush a pretty strong advantage there, honestly. And
wow, I'm not sure if, yeah.
I would. I mean, yeah, what were you going to say?
Even if Oliveira takes him down.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I would still say he's a better positional grappler and just will probably work his way to a single and somehow get back to top position, or at the very least escape without any difficulty. I mean, Dariush is a great wrestler. In addition, he's not like he doesn't have a dynamite shot, but you notice when Dariush attempts to take someone down, he tends to get him. He's not quite Makhachev, but there is an element of that continuing the takedown attack in successive layers after he locks up with you. The shot doesn't have to be great. He is going to lock down an arm and outside trip you or inside trip you. He is going to rework to a double and get his hands together. He has weirdly long arms. I think that helps. Yeah, he is just a really grimy, committed wrestler, who also has a broad array of takedown techniques in his arsenal. So, given that the stand-up looks like chaos in which either guy could kill the other, I am definitely going to go with the guy who seems to have a distinct advantage in one, if not two, phases of the game.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I also have to pick Dariush. I do find myself more and more worried about his punching.
Mm-hmm.
I think, against Pereira and against Gamrot, these are big loopy punches that he can throw big loopy punches with.
Yep.
I do feel like it is an area in which he has gotten less disciplined over time. He is definitely one of those guys who has leaned into being the athlete that he is as he's gotten older.
Yeah.
He's just like, man, I could just kill these guys if I really want to.
Yep.
And yeah, there's just a lot of times where I'm like, you're throwing big punches at people on the understanding that they're going to be either hurt or cowed if it lands.
Mm-hmm.
You are going to be, there is always going to be the chance that he's going to throw something at someone. It will land only partially or whatever, and it will be someone like Charles Oliveira.
Yep.
And he will go staggering past them, and Charles will simply be standing there and will just punch him as hard as he can from the worst angle in the world.
Yeah. I mean, Charles, he beat fucking Justin Gaethje on the feet.
Mm-hmm.
Which is like a more athletic version of what you do without the southpaw element, I suppose. Yeah. 100%.
Yeah, outside of that, I do have to say, like, it's I've seen Dariush shut down too many dangerous grapplers.
Yeah.
To be like, oh yeah, he's not going to be able to do that to Charles Oliveira.
Yep.
Ferreira, Jim Miller. Who's the other one I was thinking of just now?
Gamrot is certainly, the way he handled Gamrot on the ground and in the wrestling was impressive. He had zero difficulties with the corpse of Tony Ferguson. Not as impressive as it could have been. Thiago Moises. Yeah.
Yeah, he's just done it too many times. This is someone whose general game is like, you can't wrestle with me because I'm going to out-scramble or catch a submission on you.
Yep.
That has worked once against him.
Anthony Rocco Martin's another one. Also, Diego Ferreira twice, let's not forget.
Yeah.
And he dominated him in the grappling both times. Yeah.
I kind of got to pick him.
Yep, I'm with you. Every moment of uncertainty is going to be super exciting, and it is always a pleasure to watch Dariush in the phase where he tends to take over as well. Feels like a real comprehensive professional guy who nonetheless always happy to take chances and go for the quickest win possible, even when he could win more safely. So even when he's dominating, I'm just thinking of fighting Diego Ferreira and just risking getting his head blown off with an up kick so that he could land a massive diving punch. He did that like 5 times in that fight. Didn't need to. Even in that phase where he's crushing, he's still in there taking chances trying to get an instant finish at several points. So it's a very fun fight. Really enticing matchup. Even if it goes the way we're expecting, there's going to be some chaos and some surprises. I really can't wait to see it. On that note, let's take one more break. When we come back, Kai Kara-France, Amir Albazi. After this. Financial support is fantastic, but there are other, even easier ways to support Heavy Hands. Perhaps the best is by spreading the word. We know our fan base. You're all cool, popular people with serious social media presences. You're tastemakers and trendsetters. Okay, there are 1 or 2 of you that don't fit that description. You know who you are, but no matter what, you can always help us out by telling folks about the show. You can also give us a positive rating and review on iTunes and Stitcher, things like that. We rely on word of mouth and positive feedback to grow and improve, so thank you very much for your time and your help. Now, back to the show. Well, let's just get into it. We're talking already here. You're listening to Heavy Hands? You should have figured that out by this point. It's segment 3, for fuck's sake. What are you doing scrubbing around so much? We're already talking about Amir Albazi, Kai Kara-France. Phil is expressing his opinion that grappling doesn't count for scoring. which seems to be sort of counter to a discussion we've had in the past. Accusing me of
I only realized it now. Because I was like, it took me a while. And then I was like, oh yeah, when you think about it, it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, well, you're going to be, of course, I'm doing, I suppose I should mention this, I'm doing YouTube stuff with Bloody Elbow with Dallas Winston again. Dallas is back.
Hooray!
Yeah, and this is Dallas's take, by and large. He's always been like Pride style, like, whatever, you should be doing damage. Dallas is the guy.
Not Pride style, though. That's the opposite of Pride style.
Well, okay.
Pride style is...
What is Pride style, first of all? There's a million different subjective ways to evaluate fights in Pride, which is why there were so many contentious decisions.
Yeah. But also, one of their main, categories of their scoring criteria was...
Attempt to
finish the fight.
That's true.
Right? And so, they really highly valued submission attempts and things
That's
like that.
true.
Which sucks.
One thing, Dallas is a guy who... He was the first guy to say that actually Bas Rutten did beat Kevin Randleman.
Mm-hmm.
Striking from the bottom, if you're on top but you're not winning, then whatever. Where you and I have in the past agreed that we're a little softer on that. Like, being on top of somebody, you're kind of winning unless something egregious happens. And now you are changing course. You're a hypocrite. You're disgusting to me. You think that Amir...
I'm just saying you're only kind of winning.
Okay.
It's a very small amount of winning.
Yeah, what we're talking about, to clarify for the listeners, is round 3 of Kai Kara-France Amir Albazi, where there's a lot of positional dominance by Albazi, and then a series of rear naked choke attempts some of which looked quite close, much like the close call in Kara France's fight with Askar Askarov. And Phil is saying that he doesn't think it's a clear-cut Amir Albazi round. I disagree. I mean, I don't think you can give that round to Kai Kara France, despite 25 seconds of decent, intense ground and pound at the very end. It's an Albazi round. I suppose that should jumpstart us into the larger discussion of the scoring here. It was quite contentious. How did you score this fight?
I don't know,
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it was one of those ones where I just watched the first 3 rounds and I was just like, I don't know what's going on here. I mean, the third, I was like, honestly, if you are Kai Kara France, you should have... I mean, even if I'm being a little, unnecessarily contentious, I was like, if you're Kai Kara France, you should go back to your corner thinking that you lost that round.
Absolutely, yes. And certainly...
this is... For me, this is like a... It's very much like one of those hypothetical Magic rounds where you're like, in a real world where people score damage. Nah, come on. If you get someone on your back for a really long amount of time, you probably lost that round unless you
knock
really
them down
badly hurt them.
Right. Yeah, you know how fights are scored, and certainly there was some difference in many of the rounds between the 3 judges. All 3 agreed. Round 3. Amir Albazi. I'm on the same page. The first 2 rounds, I think. No, you're good. The first 2 rounds, I think we can agree, more or less swing rounds, very close.
Mm-hmm. It's one of those ones where the inability to score close rounds 10-10 is
this is a Dallas
does hurt the sport, honestly.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, when that happens, when you have to score a 10-9, you simply get the bias of the judge in question coming to the forefront.
Yeah.
Whereas, in fact, they should just be able to be like, oh yeah, it was close. And that's basically what I do nowadays when I'm watching fights. And it helps me to not get super angry after the fight is over. Because I'm just like, I don't know who won that.
Same. That is what I did for this. I mean, I watched live. I was like, first 2 rounds, close. I could go back and scrub through very carefully and find, here's the one strike that puts Kai Kara France ahead or whatever. I can do the minute by minute scoring that I like to do, which I think judges themselves are advised to do. But first 2 rounds close, and you and I agree that generally the best way to sort of predict who really earned the win in a fight is who had more definitive rounds. And I think without question, of the last 3 rounds, none of them were swing rounds, and 2 of them were Kara France's, and 1 of them was Amir Albazi's. So statistically, Kai Kara France should have won this fight, picking up 1 of the 2 swing rounds. The most egregious aspect of the official scoring is that, I don't want to get the name wrong, so I won't take a guess. One of the judges gave Amir Albazi round 4, which was very clearly a momentum shift round in which Albazi had exhausted himself doing all the winning he was doing in round 3. Very clearly, Kai Kara France taking over the fight from that point on. It is egregious. It makes absolutely no sense to give Albazi round 4. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
He did not win that round. He just got outstruck.
That is a genuinely terrible card.
Yeah. It wasn't like he was getting knocked down and destroyed, but he very clearly got outworked on the feet.
Yeah, I mean, so in general, the decision itself got or a fair amount, considering who was involved. Heat and light after the fact. But, I mean, in a rational world, I think it's sort of along the lines of a Machida Shogun type fight where it's 3 pretty close rounds and then one guy is just clearly running away with it towards the end.
Yep.
So, I mean, in this way, it works against, your expectations, both from, like you said, it's from a probabilistic perspective, where you're like, well, this guy won more rounds, but also from a, this is the fight, this is who is winning the fight perspective, which is also like an important one to think of, psychologically and, how you think of fighters moving forward. Like, at the end of Shogun Machida, you're like, wow, Shogun has kicked Machida's ass.
Exactly.
No matter what the scorecards of this fight say. At the end of this fight, you're just like, yes, one of these people has won. Might not necessarily have won on the scorecards, but they have definitely won the fight.
Yes, and I think there's no question that philosophically, Kai Kara-France won this fight.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I will say again, one of the other Albazi scorecard I think is plausible. I think it was 1, 2, and 3, and 3 definitely. That's an Albazi round. 1 and 2, sure, very close, very competitive. I gotta say, I mean, we should just not talk entirely about the scoring. I was pretty impressed with both guys from this fight, even if I don't think Albazi is like the clear winner. And I would tend towards Kai Kara-France. Do they say Kara-France, by the way? Am I the only one who's still saying France, or is that how he pronounces it?
I don't know, actually.
Is this like
he's from New Zealand, so maybe it is France.
Is it an accent thing that's just how they say the word France? Is it like when Americans say Melbourne, when clearly what Australians are actually saying is Melbourne? They just don't pronounce the R that way, so they say Melbourne.
Yeah, I think his might actually be France.
Okay, well, whatever. Kai. I found myself quite impressed with Amir Albazi. He showed a chin. He did show what I was worried about after his one meaningful UFC fight against Jagas Jumagulas, which he slowed down after round 3. But he also found a second wind and was himself really going for it by the end of the fight. Was meeting Kai toe to toe, and I thought this was a pretty good look for his first 5-round affair. He did not look unimpressive. I
think.
Yeah, you don't like Albazi. Explain.
I just find him jarring. He doesn't look like a flyweight. It's not right.
Yeah.
It's not even like he's a big tall guy. He just looks like a big person.
Yeah.
And he fights just like he doesn't even fight like someone from one of the close weight classes. He fights like a welterweight.
Yep.
Weird. Stop it.
Yep. Pretty low output, methodical.
Particularly quick.
Yeah.
He's just like a GSP era welterweight. It's just weird. But yeah, I mean, in general, like we said, he's someone who I think has a lot of belief that if he does the right things, then he will win.
Yeah.
And that is actually a generally good approach to have a long and successful UFC career.
Yeah. He's a very principled...
Because you can see that he has, his striking is low output, in part because you can see that he is trying to do it right.
Yeah.
He's trying to jab and counter, and he can't do too much of it because he's not that used to it. He's trying to do all the parts of it correctly. Yeah. Similarly, he's a good takedown artist. He can't maintain a super high pace because it's not all that natural to him, but he's trying to do it well enough so that when it all does come naturally, it flows together. Whether that is, whether that happens in the end is another thing, because it's also very, you can simply get tracked in to being the guy who thinks that, throwing jab right hand is going to eventually get him the win against any number of different style matchups.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I think that's why he was able to modestly overperform in this fight, because he's just...
Yeah.
He's pretty athletic, and he's very convinced that if he does the right things, it will reap rewards for him.
And I would say a big thing for Albazi, too, is that as a pressure fighter, which is still very clearly what he's most comfortable at, and certainly increasingly as the fight went on, Kai Kara-France himself became more comfortable pressuring, as we sort of expected. And that's when he was really chewing Albazi up with combinations, and certainly with his jab. which I wish he had realized he possessed before round 4. When it suddenly allowed him to just completely take over the striking. But one thing Albazi does well, I mean, the reason we expect such high output from MMA fighters is that, like, it's basically tied to the old MMA thing where fighters get their opponents to the cage and then get nervous and let them off so they can start pressuring them again. It's like, for many, many MMA fighters to this day, pressuring is attacking. You're throwing. You're making the guy run away by not just threatening him, by trying to hit him. And so there's a space that needs filling. And Albazi fills that space. He gets away with being comparatively low output, especially for this division, by filling that space with, like, positional pressure. He cuts off the cage well. He is very threatening without having to commit himself. He does a lot of feinting. He is constantly measuring and probing with that jab. And because of this, he actually found quite a few nice counters on Kai Kara-France off of his pressure, because he made Kai commit. He made him throw just to back him off. There is a saying in, I'll make my second chess comparison here, Phil. There's a saying in chess that the threat is stronger than the execution. That if you have something hanging over your opponent's head, a lot of times it's more effective not to try to snap that off. And if what that thing is like, I can land a clean jab, maybe it's more effective to make the guy feel like you can land a clean jab all the time, as often as possible. And then he is going to make mistakes, and he is going to feel pressure, he might gas, etc., etc. That's kind of how Albazi feels to me. There is a lot of positional pressure in his game. And I thought that really came through, and it was not until his gas tank started to fail him that I thought he looked questionable at all as just a really solid, effective fighter, despite the fact that he was throwing a lot less than Kai Kara-France. He was still neck and neck with him. How about that Kai Kara-France jab, though?
Yeah, I mean, so you said that you were impressed with both of these guys.
Frustrated a bit.
And apologies, that wasn't one of my characteristic dead air silences. That was because I forgot that I was on mute.
That's good, thank you.
Yeah, Kai Kara-France took too long to get into this fight.
Yep.
Given who he was up against, and, the city kickboxing guys generally pretty well prepared for their opponents in terms of what to expect and what to go for.
Yep.
I thought this was a bit of a failure of preparation, because that was the other thing that was going through my head when I was watching those first 2 rounds, is that I was like, Kai Kara-France is fighting Amir Albazi's fight.
Yep.
He is backed up against the cage, he is looking to counterpunch, and that's not actually very easy to do against Amir Albazi. You are basically allowing him to fight his most comfortable fight. He's a good, mechanically sound jabber.
Yep.
As we said, he's pretty foot slow, but he's also very prone to just skittering backwards out of the pocket if he's pressured.
Yeah, and because he's at a good distance and he is feinting and probing, and, like, you don't have any initiative. He is in there having it in mind that this pressure is going to make you do something. He's ready for it. So yeah, trying to just let him take the lead and counter, I completely agree. That's a strategic failure.
And yeah, I think the end of the first round might be one of the only points where you could be like, oh yeah, maybe Kai Kara-France did win this round. Although again, I don't really care. Was when, like, Albazi tried to be slick and do the hands behind the...
Oh my god, yes.
Hands behind the back Conor McGregor thing, and Kai just rushed him.
1-1-2. Yeah, Kai actually drew it out of him. Kai was in there trying to bait him, dropped his hands, and then Albazi mirrored him, and Kai's like, okay. 1-1-2, crushed him with a right hand. Yeah, that was very funny. Yeah, but I completely agree. I mean, I think we hoped in our preview, and I did say, like, I think Kai Kara-France is a good enough counterpuncher, and Albazi is sort of uncreative enough that I totally see Kai picking up some rounds by countering, which I think he probably did here, or probably should have. But we also hoped that he would recognize the need to fight a little against type a little earlier. Because clearly when he was in a position where he felt he had to pressure, it worked. It worked really well, in fact. The other thing, though, is that if he was going to counter, you can use your jab in that context, too. And he needed to do that more. Anytime he brought it out, it was effective. This guy's walking you down trying to jab you. Like, fence with him a little bit. Keep him at bay. Make him second guess and grab some initiative. Maybe you can make him feel the pressure to throw on you, and then your countering is going to work better. He did very little of it. And then in round 4, he just started crushing him with the jab. Like, power jabs, body jabs, triple jabs. Every single variety you can imagine of jab, and they were all working really, really well, and it allowed him to land a lot more frequently with his other shots. Part of this was the fact that Albazi had slowed down, but part of it was just, like, that's how a jab works. I don't know why it took him so long to discover that.
I mean, yeah, my personal thought is just that they looked at Albazi, you know, they're like, this guy's slow, we're going to be able to get around him with footwork.
Yeah.
And, yeah.
Well, it ain't... The game plan ain't called move and move. It's called stick and move. Where's the stick? You need to work the stick.
Yeah, Albazi they were like, this guy's going to be too slow, he's going to overswing, we're going to be able to get him on the counter. And, yeah, I mean, he might be kind of foot slow for a flyweight, but he doesn't overswing.
No, I think he's
not unless you make him.
Yeah. If that was the idea, then I think that is just a bad read. Like, letting Albazi pressure, he just comes across as an extremely solid, self-assured, competent striker. So, yeah.
100%.
So, yeah, I mean, I still found, it felt a little bit like Albazi overperforming, perhaps a bit like Kai Kara-France underperforming. I thought when both of them were on, both of them had a chance to look really impressive here, though. Kai Kara-France, I mean, a little validation that we sort of took a flyer on expecting him to be the better conditioned fighter over 5, but that is exactly how it played out. That's a good sign for Kai Kara-France going forward, that he can be in there in protracted fights with other people and very likely outlast them. He still looked perfectly fresh by the end of the fight. And for Amir Albazi, yeah, he's not completely done, even after he gasses. He has a great chin. He took a lot of clean shots from Kai Kara-France with very few actual, like, visible effects other than superficial damage. And in those first 3 rounds, I thought he came across as just a really professional, solid fighter. So, and it was a good fight.
Yeah. It was well contested. It was well-rounded.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I just thought, it shows that, like, Albazi might get put into a fight above his pay grade because of it, but, you know, he just shows that he's steadily getting better from fight to fight.
Yeah. Yeah, even just in the striking exchanges here, you can see that sort of progression of just confidence and comfort. He wasn't in there shying away from trying to find uppercut counters, trying to put together short little combinations, and punish Kai Kara-France's mistakes when he did get him to lead. So I think he continues to improve as a striker. And he's starting from the right place, because this is all very principled, fundamentally sound stuff that he's working with. He's better than Giga Chikadze, even if you've soured on him a bit. You got to admit that, right? Like, at least what he does makes sense. It just doesn't seem like flyweight stuff. All right.
I mean, come on, I'm going to be... I'm going to be mean to him.
Yeah, he's not Giga.
I was just like, he's just a bit freaky and weird for his division, and I find it a bit disconcerting. He's not Giga Chikadze.
I love the fact, by the way, that what makes someone a weird freak at flyweight is being a completely normal fighter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Dare he?
You have a welterweight, you call them a weird freak. This isn't how they fight, you know? They're Kevin Holland.
If I saw someone fighting like the typical flyweight, a welterweight.
Yeah.
I mean, apart from anything else, I'd be extremely impressed.
Sure.
But
sure.
Also, I'd be very disconcerted.
Yeah. All right, well, that'll do it for this week's episode of Heavy Hands. A lot of chaff here, but also quite a few gems to pull out. I think we picked, for varying reasons, 3 interesting fights to talk about. I had a great time. I hope you out there listening enjoyed this as well. Again, we are going to cover a little more of this for the Patreon, so make sure you keep your eyes and ears peeled for a bonus episode. I am, in fact, going to try to have that posted tonight, meaning Tuesday of this week. It should be up by the time you hear this episode. Have I said that before? And it hasn't been the case? Yes. I'm a failure. I'm a dysfunctional man-child. I suck, but it's going to be up. This time. And find us on Twitter, @EvilGregJackson, @BoxingBush. Check out our Patreon. We really appreciate your support, even with my inconsistencies. We love you, and we will talk to you again next week. What's coming up on the docket?
Something that presumably isn't very good. Ooh, well, Vittori versus Cannonier.
Ooh. I kind of like it. I kind of hate it.
Yeah. I mean, it's got meme potential, which is about what you can hope for from middleweight contenderish fights.
Yeah. Boy, Jesus Christ, the undercard. Fucking hell.
What? You're not hyped for Dennis Bondar?
Arman Sarukian, Joaquim Silva? Why?
Guess they couldn't. They just couldn't find anyone else for him to fight, I'm assuming.
Yeah, I guess so. Hani Barcelos, Miles Johns is cool. Nicholas Dalby, Muslim Salikov is cool.
Mm-hmm.
Jimmy Flick, Alessandro Costa should be fun.
Yep.
Oh, and that's right. The Dark Lord returns as well, so that's fun. We'll continue to keep an eye on Modestas Bukauskas. He has finally worked his way up to the opening bout of a sort of forgettable fight night card. His reign of terror will commence very shortly. Okay, well, we'll be back for that next week. Hopefully UFC 289 has a lot of interesting stuff to talk about in retrospect. I have no doubt, in fact, that it will. Until then, we hope you enjoyed today's show. And if you came here today for the finer points of face punching, you came to the right place. This has been Heavy Hands.